Attention everybody, we are about to start. Good morning everybody. My name is Chris Gande and work for the Zimbabwe service. I would like to welcome you to this very important occasion. About 3 weeks ago, it would have been unimaginable that we would sit down and talk about former President Robert Mugabe. The events preceding Mugabe stepping down did not indicate that he would be on early retirement before Thanksgiving. He had vowed that he was going to stand in next year's elections because there was no one in his party who could fit in his shoes. That's what he said. Therefore, the euphoria that broke out on the streets of Harare on November 21st, exactly 3 months away to his 94th birthday, when he announced that he was resigning, was unprecedented. Millions, including those in his party, poured onto the streets and openly celebrated. The opposition, which had thrived on the Mugabe must go mantra, appears to have been caught napping and has become lethargic. Now, I will not dwell much on how we have come to where we are today, but only to say that the opposition and sanctions and the Western world failed to do in 37 years what a cone of vanilla ice cream did in only 3 weeks. As a Zimbabwe service, we are last on the alphabet, but first with the news. We've managed to cut through the fake news and kept abreast of this unfolding drama of historic proportion. And on behalf of the Zimbabwe service, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Voice of America director, Amanda Bennett, who has personally made sure that we cover these important events 24/7. And I mean 24/7. Now, it is my singular honor to invite Director Amanda Bennett to say a few words.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone in the audience for joining us. I can't tell you how pleased I am to be able to welcome all of you to this panel discussion. What an amazing time and what an appropriate discussion to have for everyone who's wondering what the outcome of these momentous events are going to be. We hope we will be welcoming the African American Union Ambassador to the U.S., Dr. Arakana Chihambori Kawo. How'd I do? Close? Okay, good. Say it again? Kwan. There you go. Thank you. And I'd also like to welcome those of you who are following the discussion on Facebook and tuning in on the radio. So everything that we've just heard from Chris about the Zimbabwe service and its aggressive coverage is true. What he also didn't mention is how early the Zimbabwe service, because of its close journalistic contacts with people on the ground, were able to begin telling our readers and me about what was about to be unfolding. It was really very impressive and very dramatic, the early signs that they were able to show us. And no other international media has been able to have such a close contact with the people in Zimbabwe and the rest of Africa. Zimbabwe service is one of 10 services in the Africa Division. And the Africa Division, many of you whom I see represented in this room, represents a third of VOA's 236 million audience. It's really a very impressive number. And the Zimbabwe service was started in 2003. It's covered so many important milestones in the history of Zimbabwe, but I think we can all agree that there's nothing more important than this historic transition of power, which I hope our panelists will be able to shed some important light on. We, as we said, witnessed the effects of vanilla ice cream cone on the end of an era, an end of 37 years, lifetime of many of the people in this room. And we're witnessing the beginning of another era and how that era unfolds and what its effect on the people of Zimbabwe will be chronicled 24/7, I'm going to say 25/7, by our tireless Zimbabwe service. When the Zimbabwe Army took over the airwaves on November 14th, the VOA Zimbabwe service immediately boosted its radio broadcast hours from 2 to 6. And those of you who are not in the broadcast industry, you can't really imagine what it involves doing to make that level of a commitment, hours of production. It's really amazing. And we also ramped up our programming in Zimbabwe in English, adding a special 7-day-a-week, 30-minute broadcast. Again, an amazing accomplishment in such a short period of time. And we're going to continue to support those programming efforts into this really critically important area. It's all part of VOA's commitment, and it's a commitment we take incredibly seriously to provide accurate, neutral, balanced, comprehensive coverage of the news, coverage that people can look at, and while they may not like it or agree with it, they can trust it. They can trust that it is neutral and fairly reported. So I'd like to welcome you all again and thank you for coming, and hope you enjoy and benefit from what I will guarantee will be an incredibly important panel discussion. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you to Director there. Now I'm going to hand over the reins to the moderator. He's no stranger to most of you here. I affectionately call him Ndugu Shaka. He is a broadcaster here. Shaka, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Chris, for those kind words. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? I am hugely terrific. First of all, I'd like, of course, to welcome you to this discussion. And I would like to say that I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to be the moderator for this wonderful panel here. The first one is expected to be Dr. Arikana Chihomboli Kwao, who is the African Union Ambassador to the United States. Unfortunately, word has it that she is probably stuck somewhere in the DC traffic. The second one is Dan Moyo, who is chair for the Opposition Movement for Democratic Change, representing, of course, it here in the USA province. And that is, I would say, a faction led by former Zimbabwean Prime Minister Morgan Richard Tsvangirai.
Yes, sir.
The next one is Rutendo, Ms. Rutendo Mudzamiri. I hope that I do not murder your name. And she represents the youth of Zimbabwe, which apparently happens to be the majority in the country. I think the statistics indicate that about more than 70% of the population in Zimbabwe actually seems to have been born after April 18, 1980, when Mugabe was sworn in as the first African executive prime minister in then Salisbury, now Harare. Last but not least is Dr. Frank Guni, who is an expert on HIV, AIDS. He's an independent analyst and also happens to be a life member of the ZANU-PF, the ruling party. Now, really, the basics are that I will come to you and ask each of you at least to speak for 2 minutes, and then we move to the next person and what have you, and then we can begin asking questions. And later, we'll hope to be listening to Marvelous Musanga Nyahuye, who will be sharing with us some reaction via Facebook. Then, of course, we'll also invite the audience to weigh in. And so I hope that we have a very, very provocative but interesting discussion. The topic, of course, is Zimbabwe, the way forward. So, Mr. Moyo, what does the way forward mean for you, really, as far as Zimbabwe is concerned? We've had word that there was no coup in Zimbabwe, and yet it looks like the African Union thought there was a coup in Egypt several years ago, when the only Egyptian democratically elected President Morsi was actually overthrown by the Egyptian military. But the United States, of course, you remember, it said there was no coup in Cairo. Was there a coup, in your view?
Yes, most definitely. To me, the way forward means metamorphosis, changing, meaning that we're changing from one form to another. And for us to be able to achieve that, we first have to address where we came from, what led us to where we are today, and then find a way to correct those mistakes. Without acknowledging what got us there in the first place, there is no way we'll be able to solve and chart a way forward for Zimbabwe. There are three fundamental things that led us to where we are today. Number one was the legitimacy of the government. Number two was misgovernance, gross misgovernance. And number three, I would say, was gross violation of human rights. Those are the things that got us to where we are, where we failed to get recognition from the international community because our electoral process was flawed. So that needs to be fixed. That needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed today. Misgovernance, definitely corruption, and everything else that goes with it needs to be weeded out. And you can only do that if you have an institution, if you have a government that is for the people, by the people, that is put in place correctly. Gross human rights violations, millions of us are out here struggling on a day-to-day basis to make ends meet. It's not by choice, but it's because of persecution. Political activists have been murdered, have been tortured, imprisoned. Right now, as long as those issues are not addressed holistically, we're just pushing the can down the road. Nothing positive will come out. This change we're talking about will never happen. We cannot recycle plastic and then call it metal.
I see. Well, we have more time, of course, to discuss more about that. What about Ms. Rutendo? What do you think about the way forward? You have a man who obviously was the founding leader of independent Zimbabwe, a man who happened to be part of a club that called itself revolutionaries. That revolutionaries, in fact, do not retire. They do not leave power. And the leader of that club was a man who happened to be president for Libya for 42 years. He was called Brother Leader, King of African Kings. And of course, he was the man in Tripoli. You know how he ended. This man you see here, as Chris said earlier, did not expect to be a former president. He expected to be the late president. But now he happens to be the former president, something that also Mobutu Sese Seko of DRC didn't expect actually to experience. Where do you see Zimbabwe going? Where is it going to, I mean, what do you think really needs to be done in order to get a new Zimbabwe that reflects the concerns of your generation?
Thank you very much. I'd like to say that, first of all, as young people, we need to acknowledge that we have a huge part to play. We need to complete the transition. We don't own this transition to the, I say this because we cannot claim victory that, yes, President Mugabe is gone simply because we did it as young people. We need to understand that this was a controlled, managed uprising, and we know that the military used the frustrations of the young people, the activists who were saying that President Mugabe must go. But I don't think young people were just saying President Mugabe must go alone. We were saying we need a complete transition where we can say at the end of the day there is there's democratic elections in Zimbabwe, there's respect of human rights, there's accountable governance, and young people are owners of their destiny, because it's good on paper for ZANU-PF to be saying that, or for any government to be saying that, but as young people, are we actually owning this transition? So this is where we are. So for us to move forward as young people, we need to actually act, not just put hashtags on social media or make noise about it, but are we willing to actually move forward and act and complete this transition, so that another 37 years from now, we won't have another sector of the war veterans, who we respect so much for bringing this independence to us, but we won't have them saying that we owned it, we did it, but we want to say that we have created the Zimbabwe we want as young people.
I see. Thank you. Now, Dr. Frank Goni, what about you? You belong, of course, to the ruling ZANU-PF. You're a life member, correct?
Correct.
Are you proud of the recent events that brought about a different guard? Is this what you would call change? Someone said, in fact, what Zimbabwe needs probably is trajectory change. But this seems to be a sort of Paris coup. Can this really bring about the sort of change that the vast majority of Zimbabwe are looking for, just in the same way that Madame Rutendo, addressed it?
Absolutely. It's change. And you can see the change happening as we speak right now. But to address the primary question here, what is the way forward for Zimbabwe? The way forward for Zimbabwe from a ZANU-PF perspective is, number one, economic recovery, addressing our economic fundamentals and ensuring that we put in place sound economic policies that attract investment, and ensuring that things like property rights are protected, investors are welcome into Zimbabwe to do business, improve the ease of doing business in Zimbabwe. The second thing that the new government and the new renewed ZANU-PF is going to do is to ensure that there's affordable access to healthcare for all Zimbabweans. We are no longer going to see a situation where Zimbabweans have to board on planes, cross borders to look for healthcare. The infrastructure is there. We just need to put our house in order. The third thing that you're going to see is realigning our Electoral Act with the Constitution of Zimbabwe to ensure that the next elections that are taking place in the next 7 to 8 months are in compliance with the law, with the fundamental law of Zimbabwe, the Constitution of Zimbabwe. I know that my comrades here on the left side, especially MDC, they have been saying they need reforms, they need reforms. But those reforms must be within the law. And the primary thing that we need to do is to ensure that the Electoral Act of Zimbabwe is in conformity with the new constitution. And that's a priority for the new government and for the ruling party. We also need to get rid of corruption. And we have seen the new president, President Emerson Mnangagwa, hitting the ground running. He's dealing with corruption, endemic corruption that has been in Zimbabwe for the past 17 years is going to be a thing of the past. Internally, as a political party, you have already seen the democratization of the ruling party, and that's going to continue. And that democratization is also going to expand to the whole country. And of course, we need national reconciliation, not just within the party itself, but across the nation. Those are some of the fundamental changes that you're going to see. But back to your last question, yes, this is change. President Mnangagwa is already showing that he's different from President Mugabe in terms of how he's executing his office as President of the Republic.
How has he done that so far? Are you talking about talking the talk?
Absolutely. So far, he's talking of a leaner government. We don't need a bloated government. That's number one. Number two, I've already alluded to the fact that he's already dealing with corruption. You've seen senior government officials, former government officials, being arrested, and now they are going through the legal processes. This is going to expand. You see, everyone was complaining in Zimbabwe about police corruption, for example. Nowadays, that's a thing of the past already. And he's dealing with those things. He is consulting both within the party and across sectors in Zimbabwe, including the opposition. He has invited them to discuss with them their views on how best we can together move forward as Zimbabwe. Those are fundamental changes, quite different from President Mugabe.
I see. Thank you very much. And let's welcome, of course, Dr. Arikana Chomboli Kwawo, the African Union Ambassador to the United States. Sorry about the traffic problems that we gather that you encountered. And I guess my very simple question to you really, how do you look at, or do you see the way forward for Zimbabwe, at least from the African Union perspective? You said, for example, that there was no coup in Harare. And yet, about, more or less the same kind of event took place several years ago in Egypt. And the African Union, in fact, condemned that event that it called a coup and demanded that the soldiers restore constitutional order. This was Egypt's perhaps only ever democratically elected President Morsi. And of course, the United States, for its purpose, did not see a coup in Cairo. Do you believe from the US? Because there are a lot of people who actually think there was a coup.
Well, you have to look at the constitution of Zimbabwe. There was a possibility that there could have been instability within the country. And according to the Zimbabwean constitution, the army could step in the event there's a possibility of instability within the country. They acted within the constitution to do that. So there was no coup, but there was provision within the constitution for the army to do that because of the condition on the ground at that time. And they moved in swiftly according to the constitution and addressed the issue. And we're just so glad that Zimbabwe has set an example for Africa, how we don't have to kill each other. There was no looting, no killing. It was a peaceful transition. And it's a good day, and it's a new day in Zimbabwe. And from the African Union side, we are very proud and pleased that Africa in general, and Zimbabwe is leading the way, that we have matured as communities from a political point of view. So yes, Zimbabwe is a success story, and I reiterate, there was no coup.
I know that, I remember General Constantino Chiwenga said that the army did not want to see Zimbabwe become another Somalia. He did not want to see Zimbabwe become another Central African Republic and what have you. He could probably have also added, he did not want to see Zimbabwe become South Sudan. But what about some people who actually say it was really not because there was going to be instability in Zimbabwe, but rather that the army felt that they were going actually to lose privileges because Dr. Grace Mugabe was poised perhaps to actually take over the ruling party and end up purging some of those military officers.
Well, it's always wonderful to listen to Monday morning quarterbacks. The issues are what they are. And so we can analyze it till the cows come home. The point is, there were some situations that occurred within a short period of time, and the army saw possibility of instability. They invoked a certain statute of the constitution, moved in swiftly and addressed the issue, and we are where we are in Zimbabwe, in a very peaceful Zimbabwe, which is going to move forward in the manner that it should be, just like my brother here has reiterated.
Very interesting. Then Moyo, what about the opposition perspective? What do you expect to happen? You're supposed to be having elections next year. I suppose the constitution requires that the elections are held before September. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what do you see? Do you look forward to having, perhaps for the first time in many years, according to some people, an election that would be free, fair, transparent, credible, and verifiable?
Not without the necessary electoral reforms. I mean, those electoral reforms need to be in place for that to happen. The reason that they've not been free, fair, and credible is because the situation on the ground has not allowed for that. We need a new independent electoral body. That is the trust of all the stakeholders. The current one does not have the trust of all the stakeholders. It is not independent. We need the UN supervision of the elections. We cannot continue counting on ZANU-PF's friends to come and monitor the elections and decide that they were free and fair. We need an impartial body, somebody who's independent, to come in and do that. We cannot afford Zimbabwe to be a military state. We need the military confined to the barracks where they belong, as per our constitution. Right now, we have a weak president in Mnangagwa. He's serving at the pleasure of the military. We cannot say that whatever he's saying right now is really from him and is what he's going to do. Talk is cheap on paper. Yes, he can say all those things. Mugabe promised 2 million jobs in 2013 to lure voters for him. And what did we have? We ended up with 4 million vendors on the streets. So we cannot buy that. The diaspora needs to have a vote. We as Zimbabweans outside who have been pushed by the government, the private government, if they are serious about legitimate elections, we should be included in those elections. It is not reinventing the wheel. Other countries, our own neighbors, South Africa, Mozambique, Botswana, they allow for their citizens to vote outside the country. It's not impossible. It's just the willpower. So we need a free media, an open media. Without all those reforms being in place, there is nothing that is going to change here.
Talking about the foreign media, I gather that the Herald itself right now, as we talk, is very free. Have you heard about that?
That's a new one. But hopefully, we know that right now, Mnangagwa is going to do whatever it takes to sweet talk people, to try and look like he's on the good side, so that people can vote for him. It's their system. That's how they've played it all along. And they've managed to hoodwink a lot of people. But now this change has to be real, because the masses came out in their thousands and showed how happy they were for Mugabe to come down. The power should now transfer to the people and not to a few individuals in ZANU-PF to determine the future of the country.
But was this really a mass uprising?
Well, it could have been that if the army was genuine to it did allow the people to stand up and say what they needed to say, but nothing changed from there. They said, go back home, everything is cool.
Why do you think, by the way, that the crocodile, we're talking about Emmerson Mnangagwa, why do you think he's a weak president? What makes you think so?
Because he was
This is a man who ran away after being fired and actually issued a statement immediately from Johannesburg saying, I will return to Zimbabwe. And he's back in Zimbabwe.
Yes, where I bring in the weakness is because the government, the ZANU-PF government, we all know that the war veterans and the military are the key players. They are the ones who, even General Chiwenga himself has stood up and said, we're not going to allow any person without liberation or credentials to rule this country. So you can tell there immediately who has the power. Why wouldn't Mnangagwa, if he was a Democrat, come up and say, no, you cannot say those words because we're a democratic nation. We want to be all inclusive so that we can move forward. It shows who wields the power.
Was that the general who decided, for example, when you had the government of national unity, not to salute Prime Minister Changirai?
Yes, that's the same general. He decided he was going to do that and he was not reprimanded. So you can see that the military has the power. And until the people of Zimbabwe stand up and reclaim that power and put in a military whose purpose is what the Constitution demands it to be, we are always going to have this problem.
But isn't Mnangagwa a soldier himself? The last time I checked, he trained in Tanzania, he trained in Egypt, he trained in China. The man is a soldier.
He is a soldier, but right now he's a politician. He put the uniform aside, and that uniform should stay aside because we cannot have a military state.
So he probably can actually become a very effective leader.
Well, we will see. He has the opportunity to do the right thing so he can be voted by the people. If he is voted by the people in a free and fair election, we will salute him too.
Thank you. Rutendo, do you think that you could actually have an election that would have results that reflect at the end of the day the will of the people, the will of the voter, under this new dispensation? Or do you think it will be more of the same, where you have an election whose results reflect the will of those who count the vote?
I think anything is possible, but we shouldn't forget that we still have the same system that has not been willing to invite everybody to observe the elections. Whether they do them right or they don't, we don't have that proof, and we cannot speak to that. But unless the people actually become the voice, and we have observers that are open and that are welcome in Zimbabwe to observe the elections, then we can have a vote, or we can have an election that will say it was free and fair, as long as, like my brother said, the military has to stay in the barracks unless there is a threat to security in the country. Then it should be they should then come and interfere. But also at the same time, it's also very unfair to say that we'll have a free and fair election simply because of what the president has said for now, because words are cheap. Let's see what he has done. Let's see what he's willing to do for the people and within his own party, because he has said a lot of good things on paper where he was willing to arrest criminals. But are those criminals in his faction too? Are they also, are they willing to lead by example as a leadership?
So you think that what you are seeing really is selective justice?
I would like to say until and unless we see non-selective, until we see non-selective, where people are choosing to arrest people who are not from their factions or people who are not for them, then we can say surely we are seeing the rule of law in Zimbabwe being excellent the way we want to see it. But until we see that, we cannot buy anything, or we cannot take anything at face value that ZANU-PF is saying to the young people, because we have to be willing to analyze what they're saying as well. So unless we actually see that this is no longer to strengthen a faction, this is for the people, this is for the voices that are truly represented in Zimbabwe, then as a young person, I'm not willing to take anything at face value.
Dr. Guni, what about you? Selective justice here? Earlier, of course, you said that the president has actually come out strongly against corruption and has even demonstrated, his resolve by arresting some former Minister of Finance and all that kind of stuff. But isn't that man part of what was called G40? The people that supported Dr. Grace Mugabe?
Well, first and foremost, we haven't seen selective application of the law yet. As of now, the police and our law enforcement agencies have been given all power to investigate all forms of corruption or criminal activity and arrest everybody without fear or favor. There is no instruction from the president or the party to simply go after former G40 members or the opposition for that matter. So let's give the new government some time to perform and criticize them where criticism is worthy. Right now, my friend seems to be living in the past. He's making criticisms of what happened 70 years ago or 10 years ago. We are in a new political dispensation in Zimbabwe. And things are changing too fast maybe for the opposition to even notice. Seriously.
But there are some people who are saying, frankly, in fairness, of course, to statements issued by the new president, Mnangagwa, that there are a lot of generals who are very, very corrupt. And there are a lot of people within ZANU-PF, which of course supported Mnangagwa, that are very corrupt.
Well,
And they have not been touched so far.
well, if anybody has evidence that somebody has been corrupt, bring that evidence to law enforcement agencies, and those people will be properly investigated, and the course of justice will take its course. And going back to something that the MDC here has been saying, that they want the United Nations to come and run the elections in Zimbabwe. We are not Somalia. We are not coming out of civil war. We don't need the United Nations to come and run our elections. We are a sovereign state. We will invite the United Nations to come and observe our elections like we always do, including other bodies that are not biased, that are fair, and like I said in my opening remarks, the new president and ZANU-PF is determined to ensure that the next elections are going to be free, fair, transparent, and democratic.
How are they going to do that? Are you going to come up with a new electoral body that perhaps reflects the diversity, the political diversity of the stakeholders in Zimbabwe?
The electoral body in Zimbabwe is guided by the law. And like I've already said,
But how is it selected? How are the members, the commissioners chosen? And who chooses them?
well, you're asking a question of what has already happened in the past. The electoral body was properly constituted according to the laws of Zimbabwe. Our parliament and the president, who was there, the former president, looked at the people who were nominated, they were properly constituted, and they are there and they are doing their jobs. What has been the biggest impediment right now is that the Electoral Act of Zimbabwe is not properly aligned with the new constitution, and that's a fundamental reform that needs to happen before the elections and as soon as possible. And I can assure you that from a ZANU-PF's perspective and from the new government, that's a top priority to ensure that our elections are run in accordance with the law. And for that matter, it's not the electoral body that goes and votes. Their job is to simply run the elections and count the votes. It's the people of Zimbabwe that vote. Unlike our comrades from the opposition, ZANU-PF right now is very busy pushing our people to go and register so that they can go and vote. That's a fundamental thing that needs to be done. Instead of criticizing the electoral body, mobilize your voters, mobilize your supporters to go and register so that they can go and vote. May I also take this opportunity to look at one more thing that my comrade here talked about, the diaspora vote. I believe the diaspora vote is important. It's guaranteed in the new constitution, and once the realignment of the Electoral Act and the constitution has been completed, that will become effective law. It now will then become a question of capacity for the new government to ensure that people in the diaspora are able to vote. But given that we only have 7 months between now and the elections, I can foresee some challenges in ensuring that everybody from all over the world is given the same opportunity to vote. And last, to my young friend here, ZANU-PF has a vibrant youth program. You're most welcome to come and join us.
The one,
Come and help us institute change.
The young people who were supporting Dr. Grace Mugabe, correct?
Oh, yes, some of them were supporting Dr. Mugabe and Dr. Grace Mugabe, and when we realized that the people who were in the G40, led by Dr. Grace Mugabe, were diverting from the fundamental principles of our party, we took corrective measures, and that has been addressed. It's going to be a thing of the past. We are re-democratizing our party. Even people that were in the G40, they are being welcomed back into the party, provided they are willing to toe the party line.
Let's go back to the electoral body. Yeah, you seem to think that all the opposition need to do, or the other stakeholders need to do, frankly, is simply mobilize and organize votes. But the electoral body is very significant, and I'm sure you are following very closely the developments in Kenya, where you have an independent electoral boundaries commission, but actually happens to be only independent in name. Because at the end of the day, it is subordinate to the executive, led by President Uhuru Kenyatta. You know as well as I do that there was an election or an event in Kenya on August 8th. And the Supreme Court annulled that particular event or election and ordered the IEBC to open or access the opposition people to a server. And that was never opened. The server was never opened. As we talk now, it has never been opened. And to be honest with you, there is a lot of, I would say, a lot of belief that the person who won that election on August 8th in Kenya must be in that server. And it couldn't be Uhuru Kenyatta, because if it was Uhuru Kenyatta in that server would have been opened yesterday. Yeah. So how can we be sure, frankly, that because you simply have an electoral body that has been established by, as per, the Zimbabwean constitution and what have you, that in fact it is independent enough to carry out an election whose results will reflect the will of the people, not those who actually count the votes?
Thank you. With all due respect to the Kenyan example, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is far different from what we saw in Kenya. And again, it's not the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission that votes. Their job is to simply ensure that they are running the elections in accordance to the laws of the land.
But they count the vote and announce the results.
Oh, yes, and the opposition will be there to monitor every step of the way. And if you have been following events in Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has been inviting all political players, all political parties in Zimbabwe throughout the process of ensuring that there's a new voter registration process. We're going to have a new voter roll. Right now, slightly over 3 million people have been registered. The target, of course, is 7 million. We are still far off from it, but we are heading towards it. And along the process, every political party in Zimbabwe and every interested party in Zimbabwe is being involved. They are invited to every meeting. They present their views where the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission needs to be directed by the political parties or to be advised. They're free to do that. And frankly, we shouldn't judge the outcome of the elections which are going to happen in 2018 before we even have the elections.
Thank you. Dr. Alikana Chomboli Kwao, how do you think that the AU can help Zimbabwe to conduct an election next year, frankly, that essentially is widely respected?
Well, let me start by saying I could not get off the stage without addressing the issue of my brother here calling President Mnangagwa weak. That is far from being truthful. I understand your opposition, but we need to stick to facts. So I need to make that very clear. He is a very powerful man, very qualified to run Zimbabwe. If you look at his history, he's the last man in Zimbabwe that you would call weak. Just needed to make that clear. Let's also not forget the bigger picture. Yes, opposition, if you choose to be noisemakers, you're welcome to do so, but I hope you do it in the right way. A good thing has happened in Zimbabwe, and we cannot forget that. To see the masses of Zimbabwe come and speak loud and clear, yes, the fight may have started within the ruling party, but the people who came out on the streets in masses were the Zimbabweans. Their voices were loud and clear, and President Mugabe heard them, and he did the right thing. Secondly, when we look at the manner in which the military operated, it takes a mature military, a disciplined military, to behave in the manner that they did. So you can poke holes and talk about there's corruption within the military. You know what? Granted, there could be some elements in anything. Even when we strategize, we always leave room, because human beings will be human beings. Rather than jump up and down and continue to poke holes on something that is yet to happen, let's give this government a chance to show us what they're capable of doing before we start destroying something that hasn't even been created. And then what? What is the way forward? Let's be mature and responsible about how we begin to look at ourselves, not only as Zimbabweans, but as a mature African continent. We need to look at the situation independently, and at this time, we must support Zimbabwe fully, we must support this government fully, and see what they can deliver in the next 8 months, and let the Zimbabweans decide on their own, come 8 months, whether they want ZANU-PF or any of the other opposition parties. As the African Union, clearly we were monitoring this situation in Zimbabwe very closely, and making sure that, first and foremost, that no one was killed, that there was no bloodshed. And we're glad that that did not happen. Secondly, we will continue to monitor the situation in Zimbabwe, and when it comes to the elections, I can honestly tell you, peace and security is the busiest and most expensive department at the African Union. Over 60% of our budget goes to peace and security, and that includes good governance and democracy, not only in Zimbabwe, but in all of the continent. So yes, Zimbabwe is on our radar, it's on our big map, and its plaque is one of the largest. We will be watching them. President Mnangagwa is a very strong.
The crocodile is strong, it's not weak, definitely. Let me ask you to respond to that, Dan, if you don't mind. And frankly, let me also remind you that back in 2008, the last time I checked, you actually won the election. Yeah. How did you do it?
Because we have the support of the Zimbabwean people. ZANU-PF lost support long ago. The problem we have right now here is that we have these people in ZANU-PF who think that the rest of Zimbabwe is foolish, that they are the only ones with the brains, that they are the only ones who can stand up and decide the future of the country. They talk the big talk. They have these conferences where they come and use their positions to be an extension of ZANU-PF and not necessarily look into the will of the people and what the people of Zimbabwe are actually fighting for. We talk here of corruption, and we have a brother here saying, oh, there is no other corruption that's come up. We have $15 billion with the big B that the president, the former president himself, stood up and said this money was stolen. And who was there? Who are the people mining those diamonds where the money went missing? Chiwenga, the general, is right there with his company. Mnangagwa is right there with his company. These are all the people that were mining those same diamonds that went missing, that today we are being told there is no corruption. What is happening right now is that the people of Zimbabwe are being drawn into a factional fight within ZANU-PF, where the corruption now is only being pointed at the G40 cabal and not the Lacoste faction. And we are not moving forward. If we are serious about moving Zimbabwe forward, because I think this is a waste of time. We've had these conferences over and over for a very long time. And every time the ZANU-PF people come and say, we will do this, we will do that, we will do that, and then we all drink tea and walk away. And nothing happens. And it's always been the same. When are we going, as Zimbabwe, as a people, going to accept that this is not working? We cannot continue doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result. Einstein called that insanity.
Albert Einstein. Well, then time is not our best ally. We have to go to Marvelous Msanga Nyahuye for, video and social media segment. Let's go, Marvelous.
Tall enough, I'm not sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Marvelous Mhlanga Nyahuye. This is what Zimbabweans are saying on social media. And we actually have a video right now that we're going to be showing you. So take a look, and then we'll come back to Facebook and other social media platforms.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marshall Bizure, a social entrepreneur based in Boston and proudly Zimbabwean. I'm super excited about the prospects of a new Zimbabwe ushered in by the incoming administration of Comrade Emmerson Mnangagwa. For me, a new Zimbabwe that I wish to see is a country that upholds rule of law, a country which creates opportunities for everyone beyond our racial, educational, or even differing diversities. This is the country that I look forward to having.
My name is Cecily Ndlovu, working for an organization called Community Youth Development Trust based in Kwanda, Zimbabwe. My dream for a new Zimbabwe is a nation where youth are given opportunity to define their future destiny, where youth issues are considered as priority in planning and budgetary processes. I also dream of a totally devolved state where inclusivity prevails.
Hi, my name is Lennox Mhlanga and I'm a communications consultant. And what is my hope for a new Zimbabwe? Peace, prosperity, a fresh start. I think the new government should look at ways in which it can improve the livelihoods of the people. It should listen to the people and also should be able to ensure that the economy recovers, jobs are created, and we'll all be happy.
My name is Mtanda Zonyoni. I am from Bulawayo. I expect this government firstly to revive our economy. Our economy is in the intensive care unit as we speak. We wish this government to revive it as soon as possible. We need jobs as young people. We also expect this government to revive the health sector. Our people are dying on a daily basis. Why? Because our health sector is also struggling. We also expect this government to eliminate corruption. We are sick and tired of corruption.
Hi there, my name is Kolamba Sebastian Mavunga. I'm a journalist here in Zimbabwe. I wish a new Zimbabwe to be one where economic prosperity becomes the thing. We have jobs, and jobs, as the new president said. I also want the president and his cabinet to attend to the issue of the collapsed infrastructure, especially the roads. I would also want a situation where retaliation is not the order of the day. That should not be confined only to the opponents of the president. His friends, allies who were corrupt, they should be accountable. His friends and enemies that killed people for whatever reason, they should be made accountable.
I think that's our last contribution right there, and I will take over now to Facebook. We have questions actually for different panelists, so I will start with Petros Mudzamiri Muwori, who says, why does the government not involve all stakeholders in the selection of ZEC? Why is it a monopoly of ZANU-PF alone? That's for you, Dr. Frank Guni. So while I'm reading the others, you can think about your response. And I have a lady here who wrote, Sandra Zodwa Denenga says, great, smart lady. She's speaking about Mrs. from the AU. And then she says, we want to listen to facts on the panel, please. Opposition, tell us what your plan is. Why should you have my vote? So that's for you, Mr. Moyo. And we have Nigel Madondo who says, well, he writes it in Shona, but I will try to translate. Petros Mudzamiri again says, why don't you give this president a chance? And I'll also take some from our Ndebele page. There's Sakile Lili Ne, who says President Mnangagwa should apologize for all the atrocities committed by the former president. And we have also Antoni Muzi Mubaiwa, who says the Electoral Commission is a puppet of ZANU-PF. So back again to you, Mr. Guni. There are a lot of concerns about that. Lucia Stella Mabugu says, can we please hear more about what the plans of the opposition are regarding why, people should vote for you as the opposition? I haven't yet got anything from the youth, but I will come back and read some.
So, I guess... yeah, they can answer. Yeah, why don't we begin with you, Frank?
Sure, thank you. Let me correct a misnomer here. ZEC the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is not selected by ZANU-PF. It's a constitutional body which is constituted according to the laws of the nation. There's a legal process that stipulates who can be a member of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, and it's within our laws. It's not ZANU-PF that selects board members or commissioners of the Electoral Board of Zimbabwe. So let's get that straight off the bat. And let's not mislead people into believing that ZANU-PF actually puts the commissioners in place. That's not true, and it's incorrect. I forgot the second question that was.
It was also about ZEC. They're saying, can it be, constituted by different parties, not just ZANU-PF?
Well, it's not about political parties. It's about the qualifications that are stipulated again in the law. And unless if the law is changed, we have to follow the tenets of the law and the dictates of the law. It's what the law says, that's what we follow. If we do anything outside of the provisions of the law, then we run afoul of our own legal system.
But can that selection reflect the various, various stakeholders really in Zimbabwe? And I think it can be done.
If it's incorporated into the new law, by the way, there's an electoral amendment bill that is going through Parliament right now. If the opposition or anybody else wants such a provision to be included into the law, sure enough, bring it on board. And if it's voted constitutionally by our Parliament, the President will assent to it. And if it becomes law, then it will be followed procedurally. We can't willy-nilly just go and pick people because of what people are saying that is outside of the provisions of the law.
Okay.
We have to follow the framework of the law.
Rutendo, it's your turn to.
Okay, I would like to add a few things based on everybody's input. I think it's fair to say that, yes, the new government needs a little bit of time, but for 37 years, well, maybe since 1980, and for some of us, maybe for 32 years, we've had our parents and we've seen our siblings, and we've seen so much time being given to the same system. We're not disqualifying the opportunity of a positive administration in Zimbabwe. We're not saying that. But as young people, we're saying that ZANU-PF is not the only liberator for the dreams and aspirations of young people or for the dreams and aspirations of people in general. At the same time, yes, young people should be willing to actively participate in politics at any level. And having worked for the Zimbabwean government under the administration of President Robert Mugabe, I have seen the good side of ZANU-PF. I've also seen the not so good side of opposition. Why do I say so? When there were elections in the last elections that we had, we went all over Zimbabwe and we saw how young people were willing to be the voice in both political parties, but they still voted apathy. They're not interested in then going to vote. So we cannot talk about a free and fair election as well if young people are just all talk and they're not willing to vote. And I will still respond to you. Young people in ZANU-PF do not vote. Young people in ZANU-PF just go for these rallies, they go for functions, most of them. It's only a selected few, I can't say a selected few, it's only a few that have the knowledge and understand the power of their vote that then go and register to vote. I didn't know that I could vote until maybe I was in my 20s, and I didn't know why I needed to vote. But then I know so many other young people when in their 30s were not willing to vote. So for young people to actually complete this transition, which is what I've been saying from the beginning, we need to know the power of our voice, we need to know the power of our vote, and we need to be willing to not be all talk, but to be open to what MDC has to offer, to what ZANU-PF has to offer, and take everything with a pinch of salt, or at least take everything with an open mind, so that we're not just going to say yes, because we've seen what African Union can do. I've attended a lot of African Union meetings. We've seen what SADC can do. We've seen what UN can do. But as young people, are we willing to be that change that we want to see and not just take everything at face value? Because it's not going to be enough for us to take unfortunately, what I see as a sided view where African Union is concerned. It's true that there are more factual things that Dr. Arikana is saying, but it's also not true to push propaganda, because for so many years, that's what we have received as young people. And we're saying we're tired, we're frustrated, we're angry, and we don't want to keep taking that.
When you say propaganda, what exactly do you mean?
All talk, no action, everything good on paper. I've been part of it. I've worked for the government. I know what government is capable of doing and what it's not capable of doing. And as a young person, we say we just need progressive administration. Whether it's President Mnangagwa, whether it's ZANU-PF, whether it's MDC, anybody, we just need progressive administration. Why do I say so? We need respect where rule of law is concerned. We need respect where human rights are concerned. We need free and fair elections. We need to make sure that there's freedom of expression. Our outlet as young people is social media. Our outlet is media in general. Are we having that freedom to express ourselves and motivate and encourage and push other young people to actually be the change that they want to see without fear of victimization?
It must be working, because the last time I checked, Dr. Grace called the Minister of Information to basically close WhatsApp and Twitter, and it didn't happen in Zimbabwe.
Because most of the people who are tweeting and being open on social media are actually not in Zimbabwe. The majority are not in Zimbabwe.
I see. Then Moyo, why should Zimbabweans vote for you?
Also, if I may, there's a question that just came in for the opposition. There's Mark High who says the opposition is non-existent right now. Their silence is helping ZANU-PF rebrand itself. So maybe when you take that, also take that question. Is that true?
Okay, I'll start with that one there. The very reason why we are calling for reforms, one of them is media reform. The reason we don't get coverage as MDC is because of the suppression of free media in Zimbabwe. Our existence is there, but our message is probably not being aired for everybody to hear or listen. There's Voice of America, which we are thankful for, because it's the only one that probably is unbiased in Zimbabwe. When you talk of radio, when you talk of TV, the state TV itself does not at all cover any MDC events.
You say the Voice of America is unbiased?
Well, in my opinion, it's not.
Obviously, the Zimbabwean authorities do not think so. It's very rare that you actually succeed in getting a government representative to come on the shows.
Well, because they don't like the fact that you're unbiased. They want you to be biased, like what they do in Zimbabwe. So if you're not biased towards them, then they're not going to invite you. Now, going back to...
What about if you are biased towards the truth?
ZANU does not know any truth. That's for another topic. Going to address my brother here on ZEC to start off with. Rita Makarau, who's the commissioner of ZEC, is a confirmed lifelong member of ZANU-PF, just like Frank. They probably joined together on the same day. And Frank is going to come and sit here and tell us that that's an independent person, that is non-partisan. That's the kind of talk that we hear from ZANU. They do not really take these things serious. Secondly, we talk about 2008, where MDC won the election, right? How long did it take for those results to come out from the same ZEC? It took a month. And when people tell us that, oh, you are invited, you can be there and see the vote counting, that never happened. The army scooped all the ballot boxes, took them to some place nobody knows, and came back after a month and said, these are the results, accept them. And so when we have a situation like that, and then people want to force these things down on us and say, accept because that is the law, that is how Makarau is there because she was chosen by the people, this is all a fallacy, which leads me to the point that the sister raised here about voter apathy, especially amongst the youth. The youth have realized that what is the point? Why waste my time to go and vote when my vote is going to be stolen? Hence, there is a need for electoral reforms to be done now, immediately, before we even go to the election. Because that way you're going to win the hearts and minds of the young voters, because they will know their vote is going to count for something. And then finally, to address the question on what are our plans as MDC. We have a blueprint that is out there, which unfortunately now Mnangagwa has borrowed temporarily. Because all the things he is talking about right now are things that are on that document. It is called JUICE. It talks about employment and how we're going to bring jobs to Zimbabwe. It talks about investments, on how we're going to bring investors, how we're going to bring foreign investment into the country. It covers a wide spectrum of the problems that we are currently facing, our road networks, our hospitals, our schools. None of those government officials in ZANU-PF even attend the hospitals in Zimbabwe when they fall sick. They all fly out of the country because that's how pathetic the hospitals are.
Beginning with the former president, Robert Mugabe.
Exactly.
Singapore.
And even the poison guy, he had to run to South Africa to get cleaned up because there is no hospital. Because there is no hospital in Zimbabwe that could have taken care of him. The infrastructure is broken.
Happened, really? It used to be one of the best, healthcare systems in Africa.
We are talking ZANU-PF here. We are talking of thieves here. They live in mansions. One of them who belongs to the other faction built a $50 million mansion on a salary of less than $1,000 a month. And when you ask them, where is this money coming from? You get these answers that we get here.
The crocodile will get them. Time is not our best ally. Let's go to Ambassador Arikana Chihombori very briefly, because we need to go to the audience really to ask you questions.
Right. Well, let me start with the young lady. I think she made a comment about the youth and youth not voting. I think that, again, we go back to, as African Union, we realize that our future rests in our youth. A government, an entity is as good as its people. That's why we, as the African Union, we realize when it comes to capacity on the continent and moving our agenda forward, we're definitely looking forward to our youth, and more importantly, we're looking to our diaspora. What really disappoints me when I listen to my brother here, Moyo, opposition, again, like the question on Facebook was, the opposition is disorganized. So you cannot just sit there and make noise when you're not organized. Articulate your agenda so people can understand where you want to take the country to. Don't just sit there and complain and complain and complain, but you have nothing to tell the people as to how you plan to change the situation that we have today. Secondly, let's look at even Zimbabweans in the diaspora. And I'm going to look at the diaspora in general as Africans. It's our frustration as the African Union. We've made the 6th region. All people of African descent living in the diaspora, this is the 6th region. The 6th region needs to organize itself. Let's look at the Indian diaspora in this country. Organized, doing amazing things in India because they understand that their sheer survival depends on their unity. Let's look at the Jews, the Irish, the Chinese, the Irish, all other ethnic groups. They're organized. Let's look at the Africans. Down to tribalism. Zimbabweans in this country, if you really want to get something done in your country and speak with one voice, if President Mnangagwa is going to say, we are going to have the Zimbabweans vote, are you even organized in any meaningful way as Zimbabweans? The answer is no. So you got to take responsibility for what you need to do. President Kennedy said, ask not what your country has done for you, but what you have done for your country. What have you done for Zimbabwe? If you want to know what is wrong with Zimbabwe, I ask all of you, take a mirror and look at the image in the mirror and have a serious conversation with the image in the mirror, because a leader is as good as the people around them. Diaspora, we must organize and we must speak with one voice, and that is the only way we can begin to take our place in the politics, not only in Zimbabwe, but across the continent.
Dr. Chihombori Kwawo, if you were to talk to us from the deepest, better part of the bottom of your Zimbabwean heart and soul, does the opposition in Zimbabwe really have the freedom to organize and mobilize, really?
The opposition, I do believe, has the freedom to organize, but they're not organized within themselves. They need to, first of all, make sure they're organized and articulate their agenda. We need strong opposition. We welcomed MDC when MDC started. But MDC needs to be organized. It is just that simple. Don't run away from it, my brother.
Thank
It's a
you.
fact.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the audience. Yeah, you. The question.
You can come over here.
Please give us your name and where you come from.
My name is Shingi. I'm from Zimbabwe. My first question is for Dr. Guni, who is a ZANU-PF member and supporter.
I think due to, really shortage of time, we will only allow each individual to ask one question, sincerely.
Okay.
Thank you.
I guess I'll change my question to be for the MDC. Mr. Den Moyo, the MDC has been silent, and in your comments you talked about how you don't have a medium to voice your concerns. Facebook Live is the new thing. We don't see anything on Facebook from the MDC, with the exception of Advocate Chamisa and maybe Coulthard when he was the Minister of Education. And as Madam Ambassador said, it's time for MDC to stop whining and complaining and being social commentators and telling us the exact same things that we know. There's no healthcare in Zimbabwe. Someone has a 50-bedroom mansion. What is your strategy as MDC? That's what we want to know. You need to stop commenting on things that we already know. We want to know what your strategy is. ZANU-PF has a strategy. They did this, and as somebody alluded, they probably hoodwinked us, but that's their strategy. What is yours?
Thank you. Go for it.
Our strategy really is for our people to have their vote secured. Because it starts with that. It starts with building a government for the people, by the people. And I think in terms of how we can get there, we know that we have the support of the majority of Zimbabweans because of all the things that have happened to them because of ZANU-PF. If given the opportunity to have a free and fair election, we did get into the GNU in 2009, and everything changed in Zimbabwe. We had an economy that was underground, that had been grounded by ZANU-PF. When we came in, suddenly when shelves were empty in stores, they were full again. We were able to resuscitate a dying economy. And everyone that you can speak to, that's why now people are busy saying, let's have another GNU to try and revive the economy. It shows that our policies that we brought into that GNU are the ones that got us out of the abyss that we're in. We still have the same principles and same values. We have not changed. We're a social democratic movement that is there for the people, the workers mostly, to make sure that there's equal opportunities for all. And we are open to business. We are open. We just need to have a fair playing ground, which we have not gotten in the past 37 years.
Thank you. Make sure that we involve all the panelists here. I think it would be fair, for example, to ask a question to Dr. Guni, Rutendo, and the ambassador.
Yes, thank you. My name is Golden Makusha, and I'm excited like any other Zimbabweans and non-Zimbabweans about the change that came to Zimbabwe, whichever way it came. We may argue about whether it was a coup or no coup, and excited about this discussion here. I have a question, though, which will transcend through all the people who are there, and particularly one question which was of concern to me was listening to the deliberations there, Dr. Rikano Chombori. The way you're answering the questions, I mean, I see you're the ambassador, the African Union ambassador, and it appeared as though you are coming in as a position to support ZANU-PF on your responses that were there. And my question is, the African Union, is it supporting ZANU-PF? Is it partisan in terms of the parties that it supports? And if MDC is unorganized, as you mentioned, what do you give them as advice as the African Union? Do you also represent them to allow them to be able to be organized when they come in and say, okay, we want to make a change in Zimbabwe? Now, having said that, the other question that I have also, which is broad, is to say...
Please stick with one.
Okay.
One, please.
I would like to respond to that.
Yes.
like I stated, we would like to have an effective opposition in Zimbabwe. It is healthy for our democracy. So it is disappointing when we see what could have been a very effective Zimbabwean opposition just not getting itself together. So we are stating the fact. We support the government of Zimbabwe, whether it was Mugabe or President Mnangagwa. Where we are today, we have a system in place. We have a new government in place. We would like to see the Zimbabweans give this new government a chance to show us what they can do. And in 8 months, if the Zimbabweans do not like this government, then let the Zimbabweans come to the polls. As for the opposition, we really were hoping that this opposition would have been a very strong opposition, because that's what calls for a strong democracy. But they're failing us in the sense that they're not articulating their agenda. So we support them, but they need to be strong and articulate the agenda so Zimbabweans can have a good choice in 8 months.
Madam Ambassador, unfortunately, time is not our best ally. Next question.
Yes, Roderick Machekano, and my question is to all of the panelists. Now, given that there is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of leveling the field, especially toward the elections, would both parties be interested in postponing the elections so that they can be held in an atmosphere where everybody thinks or agrees that the outstanding issues have been resolved?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Machekano. Right now, the elections are scheduled to happen between 18 July and 28 August next year. For there to be a postponement, there must be a legal reason, and right now there isn't. There is no legal proviso to change the dates for those elections right now. I heard my brother here talking about the possibility of another GNU. Why do you want an unelected group of people to govern you when there's a chance for, when we have a chance in 7 months to elect a free government? If you don't want ZANU-PF, vote whomever you want. We are very busy organizing our membership to vote us back into power. What is the opposition doing? Busy fighting amongst themselves instead of organizing themselves.
Thank you. Thank you. But someone of course, might say that the current government is unelected. It just came through via AK-47.
No, it was a constitutional transfer of power. There was no coup. It's within our constitution when the sitting president steps down there, constitutional provisions, and that's what took place.
Fortunately, I'm not a lawyer. So
Can I correct something before we go on? We are very much against the GNU. It never yielded any results for us. In fact, it helped ZANU-PF strengthen its rigging machinery while we're busy building the economy. We are saying no to the GNU, so do not even think that we want to associate.
Maybe you should talk to your friends in Zimbabwe.
No. You are trying to put that up.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, time is not a best ally. Please. Very short.
My name is Dr. Muzi Ngube. I'm the MDC USA Organizing Secretary. I think it's very obvious that as an opposition party in Zimbabwe, we have not only just been fighting against ZANU-PF, we've been also fighting against the African Union, because these are the same organizations that have been just useless to help Zimbabweans. African Union and SADC, they've never amounted to anything as far as I'm concerned as a Zimbabwean citizen. And to Dr. Frank Guni, you mentioned that the new president is going to have some reconciliation talk, I guess, in Zimbabwe. Is that going to also include the genocide that he was actually involved in Matebeleland and Midlands in the early 80s? Is President Mnangagwa going to actually apologize to the people of Midlands and Matebeleland for the genocide that he was part of, so that we can all move together as Zimbabweans?
Interesting. In fact, some people have been saying that perhaps you should borrow a leaf from your southern neighbors, South Africa, so that you can institute a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. What about that?
Well, let me be very quick here. The question of what happened in the 80s during the Gukurahundi period is going to be addressed within the appropriate forum within our legal framework. Yes, our former president described it as a moment of madness. He did say that. And I'm sure the current president will address it within the framework of the law and within the appropriate forum. That's a direct answer to you. And our national reconciliation expands beyond what happened in the 80s. It moves even to what happened just prior to the handover of power in Zimbabwe. There's been a lot of acrimony amongst our people. And our president is saying, let bygones be bygones. Let's move forward together, whether in the opposition or in the ruling party. Let's work together.
Last question. I suppose it has to be last question, because time again, not really, it happens not to be a best ally.
My name is Cedric Bryant, Dr. Cedric Bryant, of course. I'm not a Zimbabwean, but I'm an African. And I'm listening to the African Union representative, Dr. I'm sorry, miss, what's your name, please? You speak very passionately about this organization to the Mr. Mayor there. My question is the African Union, are they organized? I think they are one of the most useless organizations. Okay. No offense, but I think there's, with all the corruption and the injustices in Africa, they espouse those things, okay? And what that does to our people, every part of the world when we go, when you say, oh, that's all African, it makes us look like abject citizens or abject people of the world, because the African Union is useless. They have no objectives. They need to get some objective, and they need to hold every African leaders that is involved in atrocity, corruption, like this, Mugabe's party here, okay, need to hold them accountable. And if they continue to indulge in those behavior, you should eject them from the African Union and then take some stand against them. But I think you guys are unorganized, and I think you guys are ineffective.
Thank you very much. I think in fairness, frankly, you should probably explain really what the African Union is or is not.
Absolutely. I think it's
because
important.
It has no sovereign status, so.
Yes, I think it's important that first and foremost, when I listen to those who claim to be Africans, you're also forgetting that you are the African Union. The African Union is as strong as its people. First and foremost, membership in the African Union is voluntary. Countries are members of the AU because they choose to be members of the AU. Secondly, the AU, it has no sovereignty as a union, but the individual countries do. So we play a supportive and advisory role to the countries, but at the end of the day, the countries have got to make their decisions. One. Secondly, when you talk about being disorganized, I go back to what I just said, the 6th region. My brother, what state are you from? Were you born in America?
No, I'm probably born in Liberia.
Born in Liberia? Okay, then you are an African diaspora outside Africa. Are you organized?
I am.
Is Liberia organized?
Well, no.
Thank you. May I rest my case? No. Liberia is not organized. The other remaining 54 countries are not organized. So when you say the AU is not organized, guess what? Look in the mirror. Because you are the AU. Liberia should be organized. We should be able to push a button and say, all the Liberian doctors, we can push a button and call on you. The accountants, we are disorganized as Africans. Let's make that clear. We need to organize. The African Union is you.
Okay, let me correct. The African has a system where the ruling party, like the Mugabe party, went in power 37 years. That's injustice. 37 years for one party to be in power.
The African Union, no, it's weak. It needs to be changed. But you have to be part of that change. Please.
The African Union is weak. If you can attest to that, and you can see, because see, every leadership, I study leadership, every leader must find his or her fault before they can lead other people. So as a leader or as a representative from the AU, if you can see your weakness, if you know that you guys are weak, then you can correct your system. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are very much aware of what needs to happen. This is very important. And I think that as black people, we must take ownership of our issues where we need to. As African Union, we take ownership for those issues that we need to be responsible for. But at the end of the day, the unity that is required among us as black people is not there. So you need to start by unifying with your neighbors, the other Africans, the Liberians. You must be organized. all African countries, we are probably the most disorganized race on earth. Look at tribalism, the issues of tribalism. You can't even get Africans from one particular country to agree on anything in the United States. So we all have issues, and we have got to look in the mirror and ask ourselves the most serious question.
That exchange. Let's probably have another town hall meeting really on the role of the African Union, because frankly, that reminds me frankly of one a saying that you go to war with the army that you have, not the one that you wish you had. But you also mentioned something about ethnicity. You called it tribe and what have you. There are people who are wondering about Zimbabwe's change because they say almost every character in this change, beginning with the former president, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, going through the new president, Emerson Mnangagwa, the former first lady, Dr. Grace Mugabe, the general, Constantine Chiwenga, even you go to the opposition, Changirai, that they all belong to the same ethnic community, the Shona. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
Interesting. Zimbabwe is made up more than Shona. So, yes, please.
Right. Thank you very much. My name is Paul Nantulia. I work for the Africa Center for Strategic Studies here in Washington, D.C. I'm originally from Uganda, but I was stationed in Zimbabwe, in Harare, for many years. And actually, Zimbabwe is one of my favorite countries. Industrious people, very generous people, very intelligent. The question I have is, for about a year, there's been an indigenous, which again is characteristic of Zimbabwe, there's been an indigenous initiative that brought the different political parties, civil society organizations together to basically look at what they were calling a national transitional authority to basically take Zimbabwe out of the crisis that it was facing. I wanted to find out from all the panelists where there's any thought has been given to incorporating some of those very good ideas into the transition that is ongoing at the moment. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To start with, we go again back to the issue that I've already alluded to. The transitional authority was an idea that was mooted by people in Zimbabwe, given the security issues that were happening due to the infighting within our own political party. But since the infighting has already been addressed, we are moving towards elections. And the elections are for the people to choose whom they want to govern, not a group of people selected by 1 or 2, 3 people. So we are actually moving towards elections and not towards a transitional authority. The president, the new president, President Mnangagwa, has an option to include people outside of ZANU-PF or outside of parliament for that matter, a maximum of 5 when he appoints his cabinet. He could possibly appoint people from outside of ZANU-PF as a way of accommodating others in the rebuilding of Zimbabwe. That's a possibility. But otherwise, it's still going to be short-lived because the elections are happening in the next 7 to 8 months.
Thank you. Next.
I'm Greg Simpkins. I'm with the House Subcommittee on Africa, and I've been a Zimbabwe watcher for 38 years. And maybe there's something you could clear up for me. A couple of weeks ago, the youth wing and the women's wing of ZANU-PF were holding rallies enthusiastically supporting Dr. Grace Mugabe, and yet just days ago, we had a change of government. We had enthusiasm not only among the MDC and other opposition, not only of people in the streets, but within ZANU-PF. How did this quick turnabout happen, and what does it say about the road ahead for ZANU-PF?
To be honest, most of the rallies that you saw happening, the so-called youth interfaces, most of the people who went there, they weren't really quite sure what was happening. It was an orchestrated internal process within our party to get rid of certain people within our party, and we realized we had a problem, and we solved it. That's why you saw people who were even supporting Dr. Grace Mugabe and the few people who were moving away from the fundamental principles of our party. coming back into the fold because they realized that they were being misled. And some of them, to be frank, they were just going there because they were afraid. But now we are democratizing our party. We are revamping ZANU-PF, and people are realizing that it's time to go back to ZANU-PF. My sister here was saying she was in ZANU-PF. Come back home and vote with us. Well, she said she was ZANU and she didn't vote. She didn't know how to vote. She must have been in the wrong basket.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Doug.
My name is Doug Boynton. I work with the part of the organization that distributes content from VOA, including Studio 7. We visited last time in Zimbabwe a couple of years ago, and we met with the people from Zim Papers who control ZFM. We met with the people who control Star FM. We met, surprisingly, with ZBC. They called us pirate radio. Our friends at Zim Papers and Star FM said, you know, we'd really like to do business with you guys, but we would be shut down in a heartbeat if we did. As you move toward elections next year, is there reason to believe that all points of view will be heard by media in Zimbabwe? And is it possible for Studio 7 to find a home in Zimbabwe?
Absolutely. Yes, you are welcome to go and report from Zimbabwe anywhere you want.
We'll pursue that.
Yes. And if you have a problem, give me a call.
Very good. Very
I'll
good.
do it.
Yes.
Yes, madam.
My name is Spongile Ngube, and I am a proud Zimbabwean. And I have lived in this country for 25 years. And I feel like today, with this dialogue and where we are, this takes us back to 1980. This is the spirit we had in 1980 when Zimbabwe became independence. With that same spirit we had in 1980, let's move forward. Now, my question, not really a question, maybe a comment. Dr. Chihombori, you said the problem with the opposition parties is that they're disorganized. I don't think it's that they're disorganized. It's because they were never free to organize and come as a strong opposition. Yep. What we need today, moving forward, is election reform that enables a free and fair opportunity to all parties to agree, disagree freely, and go to the ballot and vote. So really, it's not disorganized parties. It is Zimbabwe was never free. These parties were never free to organize and fight back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
My name is Omega Taunesvi, and I'm Zimbabwean. And my question is for the ambassador. So from what you've been saying, it shows that the AU believes that the diaspora needs to be more organized, and that the diaspora can play a big role in changing the different African countries. So I know some African countries have a diaspora plan initiative as part of the AU, and I know Zimbabwe does not. What is the AU doing to encourage the new government in Zimbabwe to give the diaspora the platform for them to make real change and to organize and bring change?
This is really what I've been saying about the diaspora. We have got to organize. And once we are organized and speak with one voice, it's easier to then approach the government and table our requests. Disorganized, which one among the diaspora from Zimbabwe is going to be given the voice to go and approach the government and say, hey, these are our concerns? I don't think the government would have a problem with that. Many African governments are now having diaspora desks, and most of them that I know of, they are in the president's office. But if you're disorganized, who is your voice? Okay, then you write the letter as the representative of the Zimbabweans in the Americas. But it all I cannot overemphasize this. We have got to get organized. Plain and simple. When you organize, then you have a voice.
Organize, not agonize.
Absolutely. We have to stop being noisemakers from a distance. We got to be organized.
Yes, please.
So then let's send a letter and send a request to have a diaspora desk, and I can assure you it will be done.
So I'm Ralph Winnie. I'm not Zimbabwean, but my cousin is Zimbabwean. And he was given an opportunity after he finished school where the government paid for his education in Australia with the stipulation that he would come back and work for the government, which he did for about 20 years, and now he's in private industry in Chimanimani. Is that program still in operation in Zimbabwe? What does the opposition and the ruling ZANU party feel about that kind of program to keep the young people in Zimbabwe, whether they're black, white, or Asian, engaged, committed to supporting the country so that they don't leave and become a diaspora, but they're able to stay and contribute to the fabric of Zimbabwe?
That's going to be pursued very vigorously.
Okay.
We have a young person here
Yeah.
who is representing
The youth.
The youth of Zimbabwe.
Okay.
We have a program, the YALI, the Mandela program
Washington
here.
Fellowship.
Yeah, people, young
That's
Zimbabweans
American.
come here and yes, it is America.
Right.
No, if you let me finish, the point that I'm making is young people who go abroad to go and study in different
Right.
fields, they are welcome to go back in Zimbabwe and contribute to the new Zimbabwe.
Right.
That is happening
and
now.
that was the stipulation at the time, that the government will pay for him to get his doctorate in Australia, but he comes back and he has to work for the government for a period of time, which is what he did, and then he went into private industry working with a foreign company that wanted to do business in Zimbabwe. So that's the kind of person, you want to keep them engaged in working with the government and in private industry in Zimbabwe.
Agreed. I'll take note of that and actually include that in my notes to my superiors.
Okay.
Hopefully after we win the elections, we will reconsider that program.
Okay.
Thank you.
And does Mr. Dan Moyo?
I mean, definitely, but we have to understand why people left Zimbabwe in the first place.
Right,
We did not willy-nilly pack up and leave. Some of us left everything and just came with a backpack.
Right.
Because the government was so oppressive, we just had to leave. The economy was completely dead. So as much as we want to go back home, the conditions have to be conducive again for us to go back. And I speak for a lot of Zimbabweans when I say that.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here to talk about how to get the conditions conducive again for our people to be proud once again to go back to Zimbabwe. Right now, it's hard to be proud.
Your work is cut out
why
for you,
more
really.
of my family couldn't stay there for economic reasons.
Yes.
But this opportunity was provided to my cousin, so he was able to, in effect, stay.
You have more than 3 million Zimbabweans.
4, actually.
In South Africa, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's about right.
Interesting. Next, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the Voice of America and for this opportunity to be able to talk about African issues. My name is Dr. Hashim Ektenei. I'm the founder of the International Peace Quest Institute and Salam Sudan Foundation. And I'm a Pan-Africanist dreamer, thinker, philosopher, and activist, peace activist. There are two things that emerged from this very historic opportunity today. First, we salute the change in Zimbabwe. Originally, I'm from Sudan, by the way, been in exile since '73.
By that you mean Khartoum?
Khartoum, yeah.
Yes.
But I come from the Midwest of Sudan.
Okay.
Anyway, there are two things that are very important that we should take with us today and continue this conversation, which is historical. First, our predicament as Africans, but our predicament as human beings in the larger picture, which is that most of our societies and the system that is dominant today, I think, is rooted in 3 evils that Martin Luther King identified clearly and simply. 1, racism. 2, militarism. 3, greed. I think from what I heard today, there is a call for, I think there is a call for humility when we think about our problems. And I think the Bible was right when it said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. We are about liberation here. We are about liberation. And by the way, I just published a book entitled Liberation, A Quest for a New Humanism, available in Amazon.com, just to plug that. So we need to be humble and accept and practice self-criticism and face honestly and sincerely our weaknesses and our challenges and try to humbly address them. That is impossible without 3 things and 3 values that we should promote at the family level, the community level, and the societal level. First, we need to work for self-transformation by increasing our awareness of who we are and what we are about.
Could you please sum up, because time is not up.
Okay, 2 points.
1, please.
Awareness.
1, please.
Okay, 1. Awareness, consciousness, and awakening. We need an awakened Africa, an awakened humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we just have 1 minute, please. 1 minute.
Oh yeah, no, it's actually not a question. I was going to make a comment because you were asking about the diaspora. And I just wanted to make you aware, first of all, that the Zimbabwe government has a diaspora policy, which the Zimbabwe Diaspora Network in North America, which I am part of, Shingi is also part of, and a lot of other people are part of, contributed in the formulation of that policy. So there is a Zimbabwe policy on the diaspora. But one of the things which, of course, is common is people do not participate. Last time when I was here in this forum, I talked about participation, but I think there is a lot of apathy in Zimbabweans and other Africans actually participating in these initiatives. And I would really like to encourage people to do more rather than just talk. Frank, do you have ZANU-PF card members?
They are now electronically available. Yes.
Well, final question. Dr. Guni, do you have any plans that will help to attract back those 4 million people, or Zimbabwean people really, who are outside of Zimbabwe, to come back home?
Yes, the new president is working tirelessly right now with the acting Foreign Affairs Minister to revamp the reconnection with the diaspora, because the new president recognizes that the diaspora remits a lot of money, and we're not only saying Zimbabweans should remit money, they should have a voice in what's happening in Zimbabwe. And Zimbabweans with different skills that are necessary for the rebuilding of our nation are most welcome to participate. The Zimbabwe Diaspora Network is a recognized platform that the government of Zimbabwe recognizes and continues to work with. So there are some institutions that are available. We have so many organizations in so many countries.
I see.
And we are willing to work with them.
Well, I have to say, frankly, that on that note, I think the discussion comes to an end. It has been a very, very provocative and educative exchange, and we thank you so much. And for that, of course, I'll thank Dr. Arikana Chihomboli Kwao, the African ambassador to African Union Ambassador to the United States. Thank you so much for coming. And we thank, of course, Dan Moyo, a representative of MDC. It was a pleasure, of course, to host you here. We also thank Rutendo Muzamiri, who represents the youth of Zimbabwe. And finally, of course, Dr. Frank Goni. And on that note, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I understand that I do have a few minutes left. And for that, I'll say bye for the radio and web audience. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Who is the engineer? Hello, everybody. Excuse me. Excuse me, sir. 10. Can we still? Sorry. We still have just a few minutes to wrap up. First of all, we'd like to thank our panelists and everyone for coming. But just a few words from the director. Mr. Negusi Mengesha, he's got a few words to say. And after that, as you go out on the hallway, there's some refreshments. Thank you.
Your attention, please. Your attention. Okay, I just want to say, I'll make it very short. I know you're in a hurry. So, Ambassador, just 1 minute, okay. First of all, I'm really extremely impressed and happy the way this discussion was conducted. Thank you, distinguished panelists. You made it lively. Actually, one of our sisters, I think, I don't remember your name, she said, I hope this spirit will continue. The 1980s spirit will come back to Zimbabwe. That's really a good motto, I would say. So thank you so much. We've been live on Facebook, and I assure you, this will be actually used in every platform in English. I'm sure Africa 54 will take it. Shona and Debele will be translated, will be used. Today we have a large audience on Facebook, actually, on radio too. So I hope this spirit will continue and this constructive, vibrant discussion will continue in Zimbabwe itself. I hope we have set the ground for it, because that's extremely important. The other thing, the diaspora story. We had actually, just before the election, the African Diaspora Symposium here. It was a lovely discussion. I promise we'll organize one and we'll invite you to be a keynote speaker. And actually we'll invite the Nigerians, the Ethiopians, the Zimbabweans, everybody representing this town will be present here. We'll organize and we'll let you know ahead of time. After that, I think I'll make it short. I have a small gift here for the panelists, just to give you so that you don't forget us. This is for the ambassador.
Nothing for that.
No, everyone will get one. Thank you so much. Ndimiake, what is she? Ndimiake. I thank Ndimiake and also her team, Shaka Sali, our own, of course, who has done a marvelous
the Zimbabwe
job.
team, please come up. Zimbabwe team, please come up.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. The panelists, totally amazing. Thank you, Dr. Chihombori Kwa. Thank you, Mr. Den Moyo. Thank you so much, Ms. Rutendo Mudzamiri. And thank you so much, Dr. Frank Guni. Thank you so much, the audience. I know it was early in the morning, but you really made the event such a success. If my Zimbabwean team could please come to the stage so that we could all just show you our gratitude. And also, of course, you can see the faces behind the people who put this talking team together. We're going to have more. As long as you can commit to keep showing up, we'll have more such discussions, and we thank you so much. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.